Hello, anatomy friends. This is Dr. Alsop, and in this video, we will be discussing and differentiating between afferent or sensory and efferent or motor fibers. So again, major goal, differentiating between the functions as well as the different types of afferent and efferent fibers. And with this ability to differentiate between these terms, we're actually going to apply to potential clinical considerations. All right, so I am moving on to what I'm sure will be your favorite slide, the definition slide. I am only being mildly sarcastic here, but these terms are core words that you need to understand. So let's really take our time and make sure we understand them. So let's start with afferent. Afferent nerve fibers will transmit information away from an organ or sensory receptor. And that information will eventually arrive at the CNS, so either the brain or the spinal cord. Notice that I have underlined the A's here to help understand afferent fibers take info away from an organ and that arrives at the CNS. So that may be helpful in terms of remembering afferent functions. Sometimes you simply see afferent fibers referred to as sensory fibers. So that's often used interchangeably, afferent and sensory. Efferent fibers take transmissions from the CNS to an effector organ, causing some type of effect. All right, so that E's, notice the E's there, that can be helpful in terms of remembering. Sometimes efferent fibers are simply referred to as motor fibers. So creating something to happen. So either it would cause some type of secretion when we're talking about glands, or it will cause contraction of a muscle. Now, there are at least two categories of afferent and efferent fibers, and they are either somatic or visceral. Somatic means of the body. So somatic fibers will have something to do with skeletal muscle or the skin, bones, etc. These are typically voluntary or conscious. Visceral relates to internal organs. So organs that reside in those main body cavities, such as the heart, the lungs, the majority of the gastrointestinal system, pelvic organs, etc. The term viscera is sometimes used to just refer to organs of the GI system, so that gut tube, but in this scenario, visceral pertains to all of those internal organs. All right, so let's take our understanding of those definitions and better understand these different categories. So we're going to combine those terms. And we're going to start with somatic afferent fibers or somatic sensory fibers. These fibers will convey sensation from the skin back to the central nervous system. So sensations include things like pain, very importantly, but also touch, pressure, temperature, etc. Now, no need to memorize this dermatome map here on the right, but these maps give a general idea of which cranial nerve or spinal cord segment will provide the branches that supply a certain territory of skin. So having an understanding of a dermatome map can be extremely helpful in a physical exam. So say if you have numbness right here in this T10 territory, that T10 dermatome could indicate an issue of either the peripheral nerve or the source of that branch in the central nervous system has some form of an issue. So knowing this territory is really helpful in terms of trying to establish what's actually causing the clinical presentation. These fibers also carry or convey information about proprioception, and this may be a new concept to you. Proprioceptive fibers provide the central nervous system information about joint positioning and the degree of tension in muscles, which allows for orientation of the body and the limbs in space. So this is independent of visual input, working in conjunction with the vestibular apparatus of the inner ear. So this is an important concept that is a little difficult to understand, but really important in terms of allowing for appropriate movement with the somatic efferent fibers. All right, any damage or lesion to a somatic afferent fiber can lead to sensory deficits, such as tingling or numbness or other issues in the skin. Visceral afferent fibers are much more complex to understand and more difficult to pinpoint issues than what you have with the somatic afferent fibers. Visceral afferent or sensory fibers convey information from hollow organs, as well as blood vessels, importantly, such as pain or reflex sensations. Now, what makes these fibers more complex in terms of understanding is that visceral pain is often poorly localized, so you don't have that really clear dermatome map, and it presents as referred pain. And referred pain is pain that is felt at a site remote from the place of origin. And there are actually maps similar to the dermatome maps, but specifically they highlight where referred pain presents for certain organs. So you may have heard that a sign of a heart attack could be pain or tingling in portions of, say, the left arm or even the back. So that's certainly not where the heart is, but that is that referred pain from the heart. And this type of presentation mechanism is similar for most of the internal organs you can see in terms of the referred pain chart. So the fact that the pain is potentially presenting in a very different location from the actual organ that is in distress can complicate diagnosis. So much more to come here as we get into the actual organ systems, but presenting this concept here. Afferent or sensory fibers are lucky in that they actually have a third category, which is the special sensory or special afferent fibers. So certain cranial nerves will convey fibers for the special senses, which include vision, olfaction, hearing, taste, and equilibrium. So it's those same senses you grew up learning about, those five senses plus equilibrium. Damage to these fibers are often quite noticeable with a lack, say, or a decrease in sight or hearing that could indicate that you have some form of nerve damage or damage in terms of the source. Now let's move to efferent or motor fibers. Usually when you think about motor fibers, you think about these somatic efferent fibers, and these transmit an impulse from the CNS specifically to skeletal muscle, leading to some form of contraction. So skeletal muscle is somatically, not autonomically controlled. So most muscles of the body are skeletal, excluding the muscles of the heart, and the gut tube. So if you think about your biceps brachii or your triceps or your deltoid or trapezius, those are all skeletal muscles that are going to be innervated by somatic efferent fibers. Now, those muscles of the heart, as well as the gut tube, of blood vessels, those are going to be controlled by visceral efferent fibers. And these fibers are transmitting impulses from the central nervous system to mostly smooth, but also cardiac muscle, as well as to glands. So sometimes you think of muscles, but don't forget that it can cause an effect in terms of secretion of glands. So smooth muscle makes up most of the gut tube and portions of the bronchial tree, but also very importantly, smooth muscle is found in the walls of vasculature, particularly arteries, so important in terms of things like blood pressure. Now, these fibers are part of the autonomic nervous system. Therefore, these are involuntarily controlled, and damage to these nerves can have various autonomic dysfunctions. Now, we have spent the last few minutes talking about these distinct categories, but it's important to note that most nerves don't just have one type of fiber. Most named nerves, particularly spinal nerves, but many cranial nerves as well, contain both afferent and efferent fibers packaged together in one nerve. So unless we explicitly state, assume a named nerve have both afferent and efferent fibers, especially when we're talking about somatic nerves. Some cranial nerves, which we will highlight later on in the curriculum, are purely afferent or are purely efferent, but we will make sure we note those so you can have a better understanding. Otherwise, assume that a nerve is going to have both those afferent and efferent, or both sensory and motor fibers. All right, excellent. We have reached the summary slide, which is a great resource for studying. Please do review and get these items and these terms down. And if you have questions that arise, please reach out early and often. I hope you have a great rest of your day.